welcome to press start, beginning an indie journey. We will have some questions at the end, so if you've got some things you want to ask, feel free to ask at the end of this. We're going to go through a bit about how we got into game development and what all happened there. Now, just before we get going, has anyone here played any of our indie games?
Yeah, let's see, raise hands.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Who's played all of the indie games? That's okay. At least we got a couple. That's not too bad. So we'll start with I'm Anthony. I did Lighthaze World. I'm from Radiobush.
I'm Jay Carter. I'm the lead programmer and developer for DBeagle.
I'm Rich Salter from Hojo Studio, developer of the Godfeather. I'm Ben Jossi. I'm the creative director at 100 Stones Interactive. It's been a misnomer. It's a one-person studio.
And I'm Nick Tremaine, and I'm working on Which Way Up with Total Flip Studio. Yeah.
So let's start. Lighthaze World is my cozy puzzle game. I started this whole game development thing because I wanted to build games. I started with mobile games, and you probably can see that there's a bit of that casual game experience in here. One thing that I've picked up along the way is that it's best to start small in a game. So a lot of the game stuff is I do little small puzzles, and then you kind of build them together to make a bigger game. Never start with something so big that you don't know what you're going to do. Now, my game, I wanted a cozy puzzle game because I think that there's a lot of really hard puzzle games that I can't get through, and I don't know if you guys can get through them. And I thought, well, let's make a game that's not break your brain hard, something that's a little bit more, relaxing. And that's where I ended up with my game. It's and got a bit of story to it. There's an anxious character that likes to try and get dog food for his dog, but obviously the supermarkets are too overwhelming for him to enjoy that part. Only single player. If you're going to make a game, maybe consider making a single player game to start with, because there's a whole lot less problems. And
I can vouch for that.
and I'll let these guys talk next in a second. Have you guys got any questions?
I'm interested in what draws you to that specific genre of like a puzzle game versus a shooter versus a roguelike versus something else.
Well, funny you should say that. I always recommend to make a game that you're interested in. Don't make something that you don't like that thing. So I love puzzle games, but I never found a puzzle game that I could finish. So most of the time it was about something that I would play, something that I was interested in.
So Lighthaze World is slightly easier than The Witness or something like that.
Oh, yeah. It's like the first level or so of The Witness before it gets too hard and my brain hurts.
You said you came from a mobile background, yeah? So
Yes.
do you think that has influenced the design of this game in a particular way? I'm taking this as a PC game.
Yes.
So has coming from mobile influenced how you approach this?
The best thing about if you're an indie developer and you do mobile games is a lot of the times no one can read when they go to play a mobile game. It turns out that they just pick up the game, they press on the screen. If they can't work out how to do it, they just delete the game and get another one. So I've learned how to create games that people can understand by not even putting any instruction into the game. That's one thing that I've picked up along the way going with this. Let's get on to Jake now with his awesome game.
Thank you for that. So, my name is Jake Carter. I'm with the DBeagle team. We are making Crash Land Demolition Derby. So, even though I went off the advice saying, do not create a multiplayer game, our team made a multiplayer game, unfortunately. It's a bit tricky, but we held in there. So with our story, we all joined together from a uni course at GMC Academy. We formed together in 2016 and graduated in 2018. We decided that we wanted to keep making our games together because we just meshed so well together. And because of that, DBeagle formed, and we are currently working on this title. We'll go to the next slide. So I just want to say, things go wrong, and that's okay. It makes great stories. As we can see in this middle GIF, we've got this first edition of our AI. He's a bit happy, but... and on the right side, you can see my UI flying off. We got to learn these things, right? And on the left side, that's our PAX booth. Finally, story. We thought, a 24-inch monitor should probably do it for the booth. When we got there, set it up, it was the tiniest thing compared to that sign. We're like, oh no, what do we do now? So we ended up bringing our old mate, Josh. His poor mum, we had to borrow his TV for the weekend, and as you can see, TV looks very nice in that booth. But yeah, even though things go wrong, you can find a way through, and that's part of the game dev process, I find. I'll go to the next slide. So yeah, that's the game my team's been working on. That's part of my journey. Went from university, and now here we are showing off our game at our booth. Any questions, anyone?
How many in your team, sir?
Oh yeah, so we're a team of 3. That's Jake, Jesse, and Josh.
And you all met at JMC?
Yeah, we met at JMC Academy in Melbourne, and we graduated in 2018.
So given you were all studying game design and development, and because you're at uni, it's a kind of a collegiate environment, right? So how do you deal with differing ideas about the direction the game should go in, different design concepts? Because it's not like a strictly commercial environment where you're like, I'm the game design director, you do this thing, you do this. So how do you make a kind of level team work?
It's a bit tricky. With our team, we all share the same hat, but we also try to specialize in our areas. So being a programmer and like understanding the feel of the game, I naturally lean towards the game design. However, that does not mean that I don't take their consideration in their ideas. Like sometimes they have amazing ideas that can be put into the game. I'm like, oh yes, that's a great idea, let's chuck that in. And we like to iteration, we just get a general feel for the game. So while we all do our main part, we also collectively take part, you know?
That's cool, yeah. Because I'm just thinking one of the key aspects of indie development as opposed to AAA development is there is a kind of a sort of randomness to where the lines are as far as everyone's role.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of a project, that's the best thing in the world. Once you get to the pointy end of the project, sometimes it can cause a bit of tension. So it's an interesting thing in terms of how different teams deal with it.
Yeah, personally, I haven't been in the AAA development, but I like the freeformness that you can get from indie. You just make it your own, you know? Any other questions?
Yeah, that's something. I'm just curious about the gameplay design in general. Could you talk a bit about the inspiration that you draw from in terms of many game references, and I guess how many different game modes do you have in the game?
Oh, yes, certainly. So, Crash Zone, the main inspiration for this one was like, I wanted a split screen game. Like, there's not many games that do split screen nowadays, so I thought, let's make one. And got the team on board with a quick preview of just a car driving around in empty fields. And part of the inspiration, I grew up playing a lot of Crash Team Racing. That's going to be my favorite game. But additionally, there was also not many Demolition Derby games around 2018. So we thought, let's try making one. And yeah.
I've noticed a bunch of what look like power-ups, I'm guessing. Yeah, so how many do you have, and how do you go about balancing all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so with the game, we have a wide range of weapons that you can customize and choose from. But additionally, we want to make it so players can gain an upper advantage in the arena if they can't perform as well. So we included side weapons as the pickup. But as for terms of balancing, beats me. We just do it.
Do you find that you like to make a lot of changes after you take your game to an event like this, where you're doing some play testing and you see that maybe one power up is a lot more powerful than another one? Does that happen regularly for you?
Yeah, so when we have a powerful weapon, we decide to not try and nerfing it. We try to go the opposite end and buff everything else up to make it account for it. We find it makes it more chaotic and fun in a way.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Our game is also, a multiplayer party game, also a multiplayer local game, and the thing that I find tricky is kind of balancing chaos versus, I guess, balance.
A little bit of consistency.
Yeah. Well, I think a chaotic game is fun. Like, the more people you have, the more chaos does ensue, and that's a good thing. But sometimes you can't read what's on the screen. People don't really necessarily play it the way you want them to. But as long as they're having fun, you might argue it's a good thing.
Exactly. Go where the fun is.
Chaos is an interesting one for me, because it's certainly something that happens when I watch people play it at events like this. Like, they haven't read how to play. They're killing each other, that's great, but they're not actually playing how I want them to. And so,
I think that's a good point, because from speaking from our experience, the biggest risk factor with a chaotic game is that there may not be a huge difference between playing it well and playing it badly. So it's being able to, like I say, balance it, so there is such a thing as getting better at the game, rather than just kind of mashing and things exploding. So yeah, that's always the tension with that.
Yes. Okay, let's go for the next one.
oh, that's me. Yes. Which Way Up is essentially, it started as a take on Super Mario Galaxy. So I watched this YouTube video that kind of pulls apart how Mario Galaxy was built and how the gravity systems work, and I just wanted to prototype that, but in 2D. So I kind of did that, and it was fun. The trickiest thing with the whole journey was trying to figure out how to do a controller, basically how to move a joystick and then travel from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen by jumping on different platforms, and for that to make sense for the player. Because obviously, by the title, it's very confusing as to know which way is up or down. Because if I start on the top of the planet, I press right on the joystick. As soon as I'm at the bottom, right no longer means right in terms of people looking at the screen. So we kind of did a bunch of experimentation, and we got it feeling natural in a way that kind of mimics how vehicles work in Halo. If anyone knows that, you kind of just point where you want the car to go or the vehicle, and then it just ends up going that way, or kind of veering and drifting that way. So that's kind of how our controller works. So yeah, we started with a prototype, and then kind of tried to figure out what to do after that. So it became a party game, basically because we knew we didn't have that much scope, like we didn't have many resources or people to build the game. And we really wanted to make an adventure game, a co-op adventure game, but that just requires so many more assets, and artwork, and story potentially. So like, what can we do? And I guess multiplayer, I just love social games. I love bringing the game to events like this and watching people and getting feedback. So it's kind of just been a dream of mine to make a multiplayer game for a while.
Hi, quick question. So how did your team form again?
Sorry, can you say?
How was the team formed again?
So I'm basically the director, and I've just taken the game to a bunch of game developer events. So the place I've been to most is something called Beer and Pixels, which is in Broadway, Sydney. And I just have kind of engaged with the community there, met a lot of people. Just through my network, I kind of tried to find the people that I needed along the way. So kind of the first thing I did was try to find a concept artist, because I really just wanted to get the look and feel and the character design right for the game. I kind of just approached it in little steps, for it to work. I need this to happen, and for this next thing, for the game to continue working, I need this next bit to happen. It's kind of like steps or bricks building up a pillar. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm interested in just looking at the gameplay snippet there. The arrows, is that where your controller's pointing, or is that where gravity's going to take you when you jump?
Yeah, the arrow is part of that solution that I mentioned about the halo. It's where your joystick is pointing.
Right, okay.
It's actually a feedback we've got a few times, which I kind of refused to change based on I try to keep the game minimal in terms of art. So some people have said they would love to be able to visualize gravity. Like, I just want to be able to see how strong gravity is in this location. And we tried to think about how to do that, but every solution we come up with, we think that it just kind of clutters the UI or the visual. And I quite like players being able to discover the feel of the player and how to control it just by experimentation and gaining some sort of immersive feedback and control.
One thing that I did is create a bit of a backstory for my character. So I understood why my character would think the way my character did. Did you do that for your characters? Like give them all little personality traits that you think suits them?
I guess we worked from seeing as this is a multiplayer party game, we just wanted a diverse set of characters. That was one of the constraints. So it started from the silhouette. So the silhouette is if you just make the character completely dark, what's the shape of them? And I just wanted that silhouette range to be, they should all be identifiable with their silhouette. That's the first thing, and then color is obvious. To be honest, I think it all comes from a gameplay. All of my game design comes from gameplay first, and to be honest, character second. But for me, and maybe for this genre, it makes more sense. We're actually starting to work on single player a little bit more, so we're kind of fleshing out those characters and figuring out how they would interact with each other and what their kind of character design might say about them personality-wise. That's what we're working on right now. So it's interesting to think that other developers go different directions, attack things from different angles.
I think it makes you think of how those characters interacting in the world, and you kind of go, this guy he'd jump over here if he was going to do it, and this guy would run down there, or, it gives them all different ways of thinking how they would play the game, I guess. Okay, let's go on to next.
Not this game. Okay. This is the Godfeather, which is a Mafia Pigeon roguelike. So this is our fourth game, I think. You might know us from Inflatality, which was a wacky waving inflatable tube man fighting game. And this was our follow-up to that. So in this is structured like a roguelike. In this game, you're a young soldier in the Pigeon Mafia, taking back the old country from your enemies, taking back the old neighborhood. And your enemies are pretty much anyone who isn't a pigeon. So all the humans minding their own business in the suburbs are targeted for assassination, and you do it in the time-honored method by pooping on them. And along the way, it follows a full Mafia story. There are twists and turns, betrayals. You become more famous in the Pigeon Mafia. You unlock this dark secret at the center of it. Very much follows a sort of Godfeather-style Mafia story. The levels are all procedurally generated. There's 3 different worlds in the game and a number of procedural levels in each world, so you never see the same level twice. Here we're looking at the Boardwalk, which is the kind of beach level. There's also the suburbs, and there's also the city. And each of these worlds are protected by a boss fight. The boss fight is not procedural, but it's a different kind of mechanic each time. In terms of how we came up with this game, we came up with it the way we came up with all our games, which is we imagine the sort of most unlikely, silliest character we can, and then we take it as seriously as we can. So we just started with the idea of, wouldn't it be hilarious if pigeons thought they were in the Mafia? So the idea is, they're not really in the Mafia, but the pigeons think they are. And that's the kind of ridiculous premise we start with. And you were saying before about, how do we come up with the characters for our games? All of our characters are underdogs. It's always a kind of underdog story, a character that is completely convinced of their importance, but is totally wrong because just to pitch it. And then we kind of build the game and the story around that character. So we always start with a character, even before we come up with mechanics or what style of game is this. We think about who that central character is that we're going to try and make the audience fall in love with, and sort of work backwards from there. It's out on Steam, and later this year it's going to be out on mobile and Switch. So yeah, we've had a lot of fun making it. It's been about 2 years of work, and yeah, that's the Godfeather. So any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. So you mentioned that you started off with the pigeon as a character.
Yeah.
What do you say to those who gave the feedback that you should start with the gameplay first and figure out from that, like rapid prototyping?
I think that's terrific feedback. It's just that's not how we do it. You know, I think it's possible to start from anywhere with a game. If you approach games as an art form, and we do, despite the silliness of the story, I think you can start from anything. You can start from a piece of music. You can start from 30 seconds of footage. You know, it really. I think that if you find a good character and a story and some kind of mythology that has some sort of depth, then the gameplay will start suggesting itself, the mechanics will start suggesting themselves.
So similar to like a mood board kind of thing, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And it all starts with much more crude versions of the graphics and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think that you have to sort of let the story tell itself in a way. Once you're convinced that you've got something, an idea that has some depth, then everything else comes from that.
Yeah.
While you were brainstorming those ideas initially, did you have any other front-runner ideas? Any other animals that were...
Most of those end up in the game as supporting characters. So it's a roguelike, but it's also really a stealth game because the things stopping you from wreaking havoc in the neighborhood are cockatoos, which are like your lookouts, like snitches and things like that. So we built all these other ridiculous characters into it. So yeah, all kinds of birds and creatures like that. So yeah.
One thing that I do is people that come up and make suggestions for my game. Oh, why don't you put this in? Why don't you put that in? You said you made 4 games now. Have some of the suggestions from other games come through for this game? Like you save suggestions for the next game?
I think at a subconscious level, definitely. You kind of, all of the learnings you take from every game you make go into the next one. But you also have to remember that, again, to sound pretentious, you're an artist, this is your art. So if there's something that's driving you to make a game a certain way, even if, like you were saying, that the feedback people were going, I'd like to be able to visualize where I'll end up when I jump and all that sort of stuff. You go, that's probably a really good idea, but it's not the game I'm making, you know. So it's not about the feedback being right or wrong. But it's just as likely to be something that you sit there and go, oh, that's a brilliant idea. And if it fits into your general aesthetic, great, go with it. But you should always listen to feedback, but never forget you're the one making the game.
Yeah, good advice. Well, let's get on to the next game. Ben, your turn.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ben. So this is Memories Reach. It's a adventure puzzle cross Metroidvania. So you can explore this world, solving puzzles, and as you solve the major puzzle in each area, you are granted a new ability, which might give you a new way of moving through the world or a new way of interacting with the world. So we're trying to blend those two genres of Metroidvania and adventure puzzle game. Let's rewind a bit. I got into games about 20 years ago now, so not a very long time. Worked a bunch of studios up in Brisbane for about 10 years until it all shut down one after another. And I decided, well, the next studio that shuts down is going to be my studio. So I started there. This is my second game. So what led me to making Memories Reach was a desire to, one, expand on what I did in my last game, which was another puzzle game, but it was more of a simplified point-and-click style game. So this one I wanted to expand on it and go a bit more open-ended and be a bit more ambitious, as I had learned a lot more about programming and game design as a result of the first game. The second thing I wanted to do was explore the Metroidvania-style world design, where the world gradually expands and becomes more interconnected as you play. So, yeah, the key pillars of that game are the ability to progression action, where new abilities grant access to views in inaccessible areas. But unlike most Metroidvanias, which tend to be action platformers, this is a puzzle game, which means abilities need to be puzzle focused and exploration focused. There's different kinds of puzzles. I won't go into all that right now, it's on there. But I basically try to blend in isolated logic puzzles through to blending puzzles into the environment itself, to the full extent where each level ends up being one giant puzzle to solve as well. And scan the environment, discover the stores and play, collect pickups, that sort of thing. I don't have much more to say about it. I've been come and check it out. Actually, one thing. So, at my booth today, I've got the pre-alpha demo, which is now available on Steam. But I also brought along this weekend an early prototype of one of the other levels in the game. So if anyone's keen to have a playtest of very early, and I mean really early, grey box prototype level, and help me playtest another area of the game, stop by the booth and let me know, and we can go over it.
I'm making a puzzle game too. Do you find puzzle games almost a little bit more trickier to sell than combat games?
They're very popular, I've found, doing shows like this. People love puzzle games, and they'll come up and tell you they love puzzle games, which is great. But they're also very difficult to demo at shows like this, because people want to play a puzzle game where they can sit home in quiet and concentrate on it, not a busy show with lots of noise and all their friends distracting them. So, it's difficult, not so much to sell them. Maybe. You got to find the right audience, right? You got to know where the audience is and where to find them, because they are out there. But they're definitely hard to demo at a show like this.
That's probably a better explanation than me. I guess you guys got more.
Sorry. Swap the mic and I'll give it back. I worked on a puzzle game previously, and the thing that I found quite tricky was kind of the balancing the difficulty of puzzles and kind of ramping up that difficulty, and just watching a different kind of range of players try various puzzles. I guess I'm interested to hear your experience of how you've changed puzzle designs based on difficulty ramping, and how they kind of maybe expand in terms of new mechanics and that kind of stuff.
I mean, most of that comes down to playtesting. So usually when I come up with a new puzzle mechanic or a new idea for different puzzles, I will prototype out a collection of different examples of that in use. So if I come up with a new mechanic for my game, I will then build several rooms where that mechanic will be used, and build puzzle rooms around that mechanic. And I test it myself, kind of get a feel for how difficult I think it'll be. But then I will take a build along to the monthly game dev meetup we have down in Melbourne. As you were saying, you did the same thing here. So I then have just random people meet up playing it, see, and the feedback I take from that is not generally what they have to say, which is useful, but observing where the sticking points are, what they have trouble understanding, what they're clearly picking up on clearly, and what they're having trouble understanding and where they're getting stuck. I will then go home, I'll take a bunch of notes, go home, make a whole bunch of changes, and then bring the same build back, or a new build back the next month, and have new set of people play test it, and just keep refining it like that. As for balancing the difficulty, that's also going to come down to playtesting, and the way I'm designing my game with these kind of puzzle rooms, they're kind of connected together in the map. I'm trying to make it so I can pick up the room and stick it somewhere else in the game if I have to. So if a puzzle room proves too difficult early on, I can go, you know what, I'll just take that out and I'll plop it over here, I'll take this one and plop that one over there instead. And that's easy to do at the early stages of the game, obviously, before you start doing it for art and lighting it. But once to the grey box stage, it's really easy just to move things around.
Circling back to before, Ben mentioned audiences, and that brought up a good question for me. So how do you guys personally, as a part of an indie studio, how do you guys go about building your audience and gathering players? Because it's not relatively cheap and easy for new and aspiring indie developers, isn't it? Because I'm just wondering, how do you guys go about it?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, the bulk of the audience that we acquire would come through streamers and through coverage. The reality is shows like this are fantastic for testing and getting in front of people, but the reality is you're going to get maybe 100 people playing your game over the course of 2 days. That's not an audience. That's testing and that's good feedback. And exactly like you were saying, the real feedback isn't what people say, it's watching them play. That's the feedback that you're there to sort of gather. In terms of the audience for indies, the reality is we just don't have the budget to buy an audience. And if there are any aspiring indies out there, I'll say that any PR company that approaches you is probably to be avoided because they're not really PR companies. So it's just grinding. You need to go where the audience is online, which would be Insta, TikTok, Twitter, wherever, and just grind it out and create as much content as you can. Even if the content doesn't work, just keep making it. The numbers will tell you when it works and when it doesn't. But the most important thing is to just keep making the content because you're guaranteed to have no audience if you don't put stuff out there. I've seen so many indie games that are absolutely spectacular just not find an audience, and it was never about the quality of the game. It's never about the quality of the game.
Would you also say that the time matters of it too? Like, say, how we started the game, where...
Sorry, what was that?
My question was, do you think the timing of announcing your game matters as well? Should you start building the audience at the start of your game, midway through the game, or towards the end of the game?
Yeah, well, I can just speaking for me, and I think everyone here will have better insights, but one thing that we've been guilty of more than anything else is having that more corporate approach, which is, I'm not ready to say anything about my game yet. It's not beautiful yet. It's not this, it's not that, it's not whatever, right? And again, that's a guaranteed path to failure. You need to start showing it as soon as you can, even if it's only just at a prototype level, because that preciousness that you have, is almost like you're putting on a theatre play or something, but you're not. You're building a game. And it's an indie game, which means you don't have $100 million budget when it comes time to, announce it. So the earlier you can bear to start sharing it, the better. For both feedback reasons and for audience reasons. That's my take on it anyway.
Yeah, I really agree with that. It's a great point. And something we try to do in general is just try to build a community with having a Discord server. Or like you said, just building our socials out and engaging with people and talking to people. I think feedback is like the first start while you're playtesting, listening to people, and taking feedback with a grain of salt, like we've all been saying and agreeing. And I think lots of people have really valid opinions, but yeah, I think just building a community. We've really enjoyed engaging with people and getting thoughts and suggestions on our little server. So yeah.
We've got questions in the audience now. Has anyone got anything to ask? There's a microphone coming around, so we can hear what's happening.
Hello. Thanks so much for the talk. That was really good, very interesting. I'm an aspiring indie developer myself. So I do have a lot of questions, but I would like to ask if any of you would like to talk about how your original concept for the game that you set out to make changed really significantly at any point, if there was a really big pivot point, and what that was, and why that happened. Maybe referring to the concept of local maxima. If you get to a point and maybe you don't know where to go and you're frustrated and you want to take a big leap in another direction. Does anyone have similar experience?
I think catch-ups like Beer and Pixels, which happens in Sydney, catch-ups are a great way to put it in front of people, because that pivot mostly happens when the concept you have makes sense to you, and then you put it in front of people and nobody knows how to play it. And that'll be a pretty good push factor for the pivot, and it's very, very hard to figure out that that's what you need to do unless you put the game in front of people. So yeah.
With Lighthaze as well, we actually had a completely looking game when we first put it on Steam and that. It was way different. And then people said it looked terrible, so we pivoted it and made it look how it looks now and worked towards what we could do. A lot of people will do art for their game, and a big problem would be that the art is unachievable. You can't achieve what you want to be. You might go, oh, I'd like it to look like Mario game or whatever it is, but you can't do that. So you've got to work out what you can actually achieve. So and with the team you've got.
For us, I've just tried to be very open to things changing. I've just tried to keep the goal of what experience we want to create in mind. That's kind of like the pillar. We know what fun moments we want to create in a party-style atmosphere. And because we are a game with lots of little mini-games across different rounds, we still have a bunch of mini-games left. So, like, when we began, we didn't know what 10 of the mini-games were going to be. But I knew that I wanted them to be varied. But I was so open to just, coming up with an idea, maybe a piece of art that our concept artist had done, and then trying to kind of work that into a mechanic, or maybe we come up with a mechanic and go the other way around. But, that whole process, to me, is very fun. If you're just kind of open to new ideas, you can create a lot of variety, I think.
Yeah, I didn't have a specific point where I pivoted with my game, but it definitely changed a lot between its original conception and where it is now. And I think a lot of that was when I started, I knew kind of the core pillars I wanted to explore with the game. I didn't really know what the game was at that time. So it kind of evolved over time as I built it. So my original concept for the game was going to be quite small, 6 independent levels that never touch one another. But then as I decided I wanted to explore more of the Metroidvania aspects in the level design as well as the visual influence from games like Metroid Prime, and I wanted to explore more of the actual Metroidvania level design, then I started to merge things together and explore that. And so the game kind of really evolved and changed over time until I got to a point where I was happy with it. I was like, okay, this is the game I'm making now, and that kind of got moved forward into full production. So yeah, I guess it comes down to how you approach the development of your games as well. I had a very long time of just experimentation with this game before I actually settled on what it was I was making.
Yeah, so to reiterate on that question, the question being, what was it again? Sorry, could you repeat that up? Oh, so how did we cover the game? So initially, we did pitch Crushstone as a battle royale game. The reasoning for that was because I was a new aspiring dev. Like, yeah, surely that's easy. And then once I started developing, I was like, no, that's not easy. And so because of that, we made the pitch to make it a nice, tight pack, the 8-player game. And unfortunately, that's the way with game dev sometimes. You realize that you need to fight your battles, pick your battles, and then fight them, and cut content where needed. Because if you keep just making a game, unfortunately, it never gets made. And that's part of the process, I find.
Yeah, just one thing I'd add to that, sorry, I'll be quick, is that, it also experience comes into it. If you're an experienced dev, you'll have some idea of how a pivot will affect your scope. If you're an aspiring dev, then I would say anytime that it seems like a pivot will broaden your scope, it's probably a bad idea. Getting your game done is the most, if you're a first-time dev, getting your game done is the best thing you can do for your experience.
I say smallest game possible. Any other questions?
Hi, I was just curious if you guys talk more about, say, your background in what you did for uni, and then your experience since that regarding game dev and then software, and yeah, in terms of the more, I guess I'll leave that as the first question.
I didn't do uni. I just learned a lot off the internet. The thing is, a lot of these game engines don't. You probably go to uni and a lot of it's not going to be explained to you anyway, so you're going to have to learn from the internet anyway. I know these guys are a lot smarter than me, so
YouTube. I think, look, this is where I'm going to, bit of a controversial opinion. So, okay, so my previous life, I worked in advertising as a designer, and the other designer that I was closest with, we kept trying to turn every campaign into a game, and then we originally realized maybe we should just make games instead. But in terms of game dev experience, we had none. And I would say that, all the tools required to make your first game are free. All of them. To be honest, or there are free versions of all of them. And you go on YouTube, and there are amazing people on YouTube who will explain each and every weird thing that you want to do. And I honestly think that is the best way to begin in gaming. I don't necessarily recommend approaching it like a tertiary education sort of course. I think that there are careers that are very well suited to that. But like you were saying with game dev, the speed of the technology and the speed of the scene goes faster than any university can catch up with it. So, yeah, that would be my thoughts.
Personally for me, I started making games in Flash back in 2010 when I was 13 years old. I taught myself through online YouTube videos. I found that was a good way to give me a kickstarter. But even with all those self-taught videos, I only just basically knew how to copy and paste out the tutorials. So part of that made me want to take a course at university. And I found that was very helpful. It tells you what you don't know, like how to manage a game dev studio and pretty much all the ins and outs of it. Not just programming, putting the game together, but what it takes to get it fundamentally.
My question's kind of related to that. What game engines do you use? Why? And also, any resources for inexperienced game devs?
To answer, I guess, both those questions at the same time. I use Unity for this, and I use Maya for my 3D work. And that is a combination of what was available to me as an indie dev when I started doing indie stuff, and my experience coming out of working at larger studios and through university, back before Blender was a thing. So my background comes from not triple A, but double A studios up in Brisbane, if that's such a thing. I got hired straight out of university. I went to uni, I studied a very early game development course back before that was really a thing. I'm specialising in animation. So I got hired as an artist, and then I applied that to my skills. So my software I use comes from my experience over time, coming from a Maya background, a Photoshop background. And when I chose to get into indie, I had to look around at what tools were available to me. The options were really Unreal and Unity, but back at that time, Unreal was just getting started into their free sort of indie development scene, and it wasn't really as robust as Unity was at the time. So that's how I ended up here.
Yeah, maybe I can add to your question, both your questions. Also in Unity, so we use Unity game development engine, but I would say that I think you can approach getting into game development from so many different angles, and you probably have to try to figure out what you find the most enticing and interesting for yourself. If you're interested in art, 3D modeling, animation, programming, I mean, some of us probably try to do all of those things, at least at some point. And when you do that, you tend to find that you are better at some things and worse at others. And you can try to work with larger teams or smaller teams. I think that one of the best pieces of advice I would give is try to find a community nearby that also likes doing that thing and make friends and try to make things together. And I think you'll learn what you're good at and what you like to make, and you'll meet the right people if you want to get into it. But yeah, so many different roads to that destination.
Thank you all for coming. Now, if you've got more questions, come and see all our booths, play all our games, talk to us more about game development. We're all really happy about that kind of stuff. And enjoy your Generation Gaming. Thanks for coming